All right, let's get into the last unit of chapter 16, which is was as a relative pronoun. But first, we will look at the sentences from the end of the last unit. So we have our relative clauses in these. So let's see if we can figure out how to translate the relative clauses. Das ist der Mann, der neben mir sitzt. So this is the man who is sitting next to me. So the relative clause is der neben mir sitzt. So it would be who is sitting next to me. And then the relative pronoun is der, and it's masculine, matching der Mann. And then within this relative clause, the role that it's playing is actually the subject, because the man is sitting next to me, so it's a subject, so it's a nominative. Nominative, masculine, yes. Okay, so das ist der Computer, den wir benutzen. This is the computer that we are using. So das ist der Computer, that's the main clause, and then den wir benutzen is the relative clause. Den is a relative pronoun, and you think about wir benutzen den Computer, so it's like saying we use the computer, and so that's the direct object, so that's why it's the accusative. In English, you could say, this is the computer that we are using, or this is the computer we are using. And it's optional to leave out the that there, but in German you cannot leave out a relative pronoun. It would completely destroy the sentence. Yeah. So either way in English. But but the who, you can't leave the who out. That's always interesting in English. This is the man is sitting next to me. You have to say the who if you're gonna say who. Yeah. But this is the computer we are using. You can leave it out for some reason. Wo sind die Leute, denen ich helfen soll? So denen ich helfen soll is the relative clause, and it's where are the people who I'm supposed to help, or maybe where are the people whom I'm supposed to help. So denen, you can see, is actually in the dative, because helfen triggers a dative object, not an accusative object. So die Leute, the people, are what's being replaced, right? Where are the people? I should help the people. So we want our plural for Leute, and then dative, because helfen is going to make its object into dative. Where are the people who I'm supposed to help? Die Kundin, die das Auto kauft, spricht mit dem Verkäufer. So die Kundin is, of course, the customer or the client. And then we have inserted our relative clause, so it's right next to what it describes. So the customer who is buying the car, so die das Auto kauft. So die is referring back to die Kundin, and then within the relative clause, what is it doing? Is it the subject? Is it the direct object, etc.? So you say die Kundin kauft das Auto, so that's actually subject. It's in the nominative. Nominative and feminine. Yeah. Hier ist das Buch, das wir nächstes Semester lesen. Here is the book that we're reading next semester. So the book that we're reading, das wir nächstes Semester lesen. And then you look at, this is actually the subject within the relative clause. Wir is the subject. Wir lesen das Buch nächstes Semester. So das Buch is then, it's the accusative. Yeah, accusative neuter. Wie heißt dein Onkel, dem ich für das Hochzeitsgeschenk danken soll? Hochzeitsgeschenk is one of those very German words, one of the most German sounding words ever, and it's one where if you try to say too fast, you're likely to not get all of those fun consonants and sibilant sounds. Hochzeitsgeschenk, yes. Okay, so wie heißt dein Onkel? What's the name of your uncle? And then dem is there because of danken. Danken requires a dative object, similar to helfen. Helfen and danken both have dative objects. So we have dem, and then everything else. Ich is the subject within the relative clause. And then ich soll dem Onkel danken. I should give thanks to the uncle. So this is actually the indirect object. And that's why, well, it's a dative object for danken, you could say. So it's dative. And it is masculine for the onkel. Okay. So, die Physikerin, die Radioaktivität entdeckt hat, heißt Marie Curie. So, the physicist who discovered radioactivity is named Marie Curie. So we have who discovered Radioactivity, that's die Radioaktivität entdeckt hat. So in German you say, in this case you would say the radioactivity. In English we don't have an article there, but sometimes in German there are cases where the article is just used in cases where we wouldn't use it. So the physicist who, so the physicist, and then die refers back to the physicists, and we want to say, okay, how does this relative clause even work? What is doing what? So you're going to say die, implying die Physikerin, hat die Radioaktivität entdeckt. So this is actually the subject. It's the nominative feminine. But you see how it's possible to get die and die right next to each other? It looks like it's maybe a typo or something. But it's not a typo. This die is a relative pronoun that refers back to Physikerin. And this die is an article that is connected to, it's just the radioactivity, right? So it's possible to get two of the same one, or you could get, it could be like die das. If she discovered something that's neuter, it would be die das, whatever it is, right? Or it could be die den. If you had something masculine here, it would be den, and then whatever the direct object is. So it could, when you see these two things together, it looks like it's two articles together, but it's really a relative pronoun and an article together. Der Komponist, der die Zauberflöte komponiert hat, heißt Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Here we have it. It's the same, that we also have two like seemingly articles next to each other, but because this is part of a title and it's italicized, it's not quite as confusing, I think. But we have two articles next to each other. So der Komponist is of course the composer, and then der, meaning der Komponist, hat die Zauberflöte komponiert. So this is actually the subject, it's the nominative, masculine nominative of our relative pronoun. So the composer who composed the magic flute is named Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Okay, and then der Dokumentarfilm, den Arnold Schwarzenegger 2018 gemacht hat, heißt The Game Changers. The documentary film, or just documentary, that Arnold Schwarzenegger made in 2018 is called The Game Changers. So this one is actually in the accusative, because here's the documentary, that's actually the subject of the main clause. But now we want to examine what den does refer to the documentary, but within the relative clause, it's not necessarily playing the same role as it does in the main clause, right? So we look at Arnold Schwarzenegger hat den Dokumentarfilm gemacht. So it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger has made the documentary film. So Arnold Schwarzenegger is the subject. Then he's got his verbs. He made it in the past, and then just adverb 2018. And then, so this den is actually the direct object within the relative clause. So that's why it's in the accusative there, and masculine. Okay, then we have, ein Säge ist ein Werkzeug, mit dem man Bäume fällen kann. A saw is a tool with which one can cut down trees. Or you could say, a saw is a tool that one can cut down trees with. But with which is pretty good. So mit dem, with which. You could translate it like that. Yeah. And then, because mit always requires dative, so this is the dative, right? Mit dem. Ein LKW ist ein Fahrzeug, mit dem man schwere Sachen transportiert. A commercial truck, it's just a large truck, right? Is a vehicle with which one transports heavy things. So mit dem is also with which, is a very similar thing, right? Ein Fahrzeug and Werkzeug, those are actually both neuter. Yeah. Okay, so ein Bücherregal ist ein Möbelstück, in das man Bücher stellt. This one's a little more complicated. A bookshelf is a piece of furniture onto which or into which one places books. So in is a changing preposition. It can do either accusative or dative, and when it has movement, like you're putting books onto a bookshelf, then it's accusative. So that's why we have in plus our accusative relative pronoun, and the reason it's neuter is because it refers back to Möbelstück, which is neuter. So the movement is maintained in that. So that's why I translated it as onto, A bookshelf is a piece of furniture onto which one places books, on which. You could leave it out and just say on which one places books, but if I think it sounds a little more precise to say onto, and then it really proves that you understand what's going on here, because there is a sense of movement in the German sentence. Ein Spiegel ist ein Stück Glas, in dem man sich selbst sehen kann. A mirror is a piece of glass in which you can see yourself, one can see oneself. Yeah, we had a nice reflexive going on here. Reflexive and man, meaning impersonal, one or you put together. Yeah, and then in which, so a piece of glass in which, in dem. So that's our in again, which in this case is going to be dative as opposed to accusative, because you're just seeing there's no movement involved. You just see yourself in the mirror. Yeah. Okay. So now we have Wie heißt die Vorlesung, für die du am meisten lernen musst? Which is, what is the name of the class or the lecture for which you have to study the most? Für die, for which you have to study the most. Die is feminine, referring back to Vorlesung, and then it's also accusative because für always requires accusative. Wie heißt die Vorlesung, in der du am öftesten einschläfst? What is the name of the class/lecture during which you fall asleep most often, or maybe in which you fall asleep most often? Yeah. And so in der is in which, but since you could also say during which, just because it makes sense in this context, but in which is fine. In der, in which. So now there's no movement, it's a stationary thing, so we're going to use in plus dative. And it's a feminine dative, because it refers back to Vorlesung. Wie heißt der Professor oder die Professorin, mit dem oder der du die meisten Vorlesungen hast? So now, sometimes you want to do both, so you can say der Professor oder die Professorin, and then when we want to go into the relative pronouns, you can just do both, dem und der, right? So, what is the name of the professor with whom you have the most classes? With whom you the most classes have had. This actually you have had. So actually I should have this in the past in the translation. With whom you have had the most classes, yeah. Okay, wie heißt das Campusgebäude, in dem du den größten Teil deiner Zeit verbringst? What's the name of the campus building in which you spend the largest amount of your time? In dem, in which. So dem refers back to Campusgebäude, which is neuter, and we're in the dative. Okay, we have one more set. So, eine Frau, von der man ein Haus kaufen kann, which of course means a woman from whom one can buy a house. And that's of course a real estate agent, which is eine Maklerin. That's the real estate agent, Maklerin. So, a woman from whom, von der, feminine dative. Ein Mann, der Computersprachen sehr interessant findet. A man who finds computer languages very interesting. That's ein Informatiker, a computer scientist. This is sometimes when you have you start your relative clause with some other noun, like this is the direct object, right? It's in the plural, so it doesn't have an article. So it can kind of look like this relative pronoun is an article belonging to this noun, because when you see der plus a noun, you think, well, that's got to be the article, right? But it's not the article. It's a relative pronoun, and it's just hanging out on its own. It doesn't belong to this noun, right? It means who. Der means who, and then this is Computersprachen is just the direct object that doesn't have an article. Eine Frau, der man Geld gibt. So that's a woman to whom one gives money. A woman, so it's the dative feminine der. And then we have a chorus, that's eine Kassiererin, a cashier. Ein Tier, das einen sehr langen Hals hat, an animal who has a very long neck, eine Giraffe, yeah. So we have ein Tier, das einen sehr langen Hals hat, das is the subject, and it's neuter, yeah. So, who has, the animal has, right, subject. Okay, eine Frau, zu der du gehst, wenn du legale Probleme hast. A woman to whom you go when you have legal problems. That's a lawyer, which is eine Rechtsanwältin. So a woman, and then zu der, to whom you go. So zu is always dative, so that's why this is dative. Eine Sache, die man braucht, wenn man Licht will. I think that one needs when one wants light. A flashlight, which is eine Taschenlampe. Eine Taschenlampe. So, eine Sache just means a thing, can be anything, very useful word. Just an object. And then die man braucht, that one, or that one needs. And then wenn man nicht will is a dependent clause. So it also has the verb at the end, but it's a different, dependent clauses are a whole other thing we did earlier. Relative clauses work very similar, but dependent clauses start with subordinating conjunctions, and relative clauses start with relative pronouns. Ein Apparat, den man benutzt, Dosen zu öffnen. A device that one uses to open cans, which is, of course, a can opener. Ein Dosenöffner. Dosenöffner. So, a device that one uses. Apparat is masculine, so that's why den. Man benutzt den Apparat. So, masculine accusative, relative pronoun. Ein Gebäude, in dem Tausende von Büchern sind. A building in which there are thousands of books. That's called a library. Eine Bibliothek. Yeah, eine Bibliothek. So, a building in which are thousands of books. Yeah, in which. Ein Gebäude, das in Washington, D.C. steht. A building that stands or building that is in Washington, D.C. Das ist das Weiße Haus. The White House, yeah. Okay, now let's use was as a relative pronoun. And we have, for example, for generalized antecedents. So was is used as a relative pronoun after neuter entities such as alles, vieles, nichts, etwas, and sometimes das. So you could say alles, was ich weiß, everything that I know. And so alles is just a very vague, it's not even a real noun, right? So it's just a very a vague thing. So that's why was is used. Alles, das ich weiß, does not sound great. It's alles, was ich weiß, yeah. Etwas, was die Kritiker nicht mögen, something that the critics don't like, yeah. So after etwas, then was. Es gibt nichts mehr, was man wissen muss. Yeah, so nichts is nothing. So kind of opposite of etwas something, nichts, nothing. So there's nothing else that a person needs to know. Es gibt nichts mehr, was man wissen muss. Yeah. Okay, and then we have neuter superlative antecedents. We talked about these just a few units ago. You can say like the most important thing, the most interesting thing, right? Neuter superlatives, right? So, das Interessanteste, the most interesting thing. And we've taken this adjective and we've made it into a noun, but it's still a very abstract thing, and it doesn't get a relative pronoun as you would expect, so it's was. Das Interessanteste, was ich gehört habe, war, and then das Allerschlimmste, was passieren kann, the very worst thing that can happen is, yeah. And then we have non-specified antecedents. So, was is used as a relative pronoun when there is no specific antecedent. Erzählte uns, was schon jeder wusste. He told us what everyone already knew. So, this is the exact way, one of the ways we use this in English, right? So, in this case, was you already know means what. It's a question word meaning was, right? So, you already think of was as meaning what. So, when it happens like this, you would probably already translate it correctly without having this unit, because it just means what, and we use the word what in the same way in English. The other ones, you would say that, everything that I know. So that's why it might be a little tricky, but when we use it as what in English, then it's just super intuitive to translate it as what in German, obviously. Der Wolf wusste, was wollte. The wolf knew what he wanted. The exact same thing. In German, there is a comma because it's setting off a relative clause, so a comma. but otherwise it's exactly the same as the way we use what in English. There are some dialects there's some dialects in English that will do this. You know, the man what was coming or something, right? The man what was coming over here. And I think in some dialects and in some regions and in some periods, different periods, people have used what as a relative pronoun like that. But it is not quite used. It's not used quite as often as German. Yeah. Was is used as a relative pronoun referring to an entire preceding statement, and then usually means a fact that or something that. So these are slightly trickier. Hat diesen Staatsreich allein durchgeführt, was man kaum glauben konnte. So was here is sort of referring to that whole statement. Like, so he carried out this coup d'etat all by himself, something that one could hardly believe. So hat diesen Staatsstreich is two separate words. Staatsstreich allein durchgeführt. He carried out this coup d'etat all by himself. And then man kaum glauben konnte. One could hardly believe this whole thing, this whole situation I just described. That's what people couldn't believe, right? So that's why, in this case, something that is the best translation. Yeah. Die Wahlergebnisse wurden nicht bestritten, was niemand verstehen kann. The election results weren't contested, a fact that no one can understand. So imagine if you just did it with what, it would be the election results were not contested. What nobody could understand, right? So it's like it just refers to that whole previous statement. And if you say what, then it doesn't really work in English, but you can sort of see how it just replaces that whole thing. Yeah. Okay, so we have a few examples of those in your end of chapter exercises for Kapitel 16. So hopefully you'll get a little more practice with those. And these are the Übungssätze, and then the end of chapter exercise or the end of chapter texts are about Karl May. And if you haven't heard of Karl May before, this is super fascinating stuff. I actually wanted to write my dissertation on Karl May when I found out about him. But then my professor in Berlin, who I was working with at the time, said that there are already too many dissertations about Karl May. And I was like, why haven't I heard of him yet if everybody else is writing dissertations about him? And he said, I don't know, you should learn about him. But anyway, it's fascinating stuff. So if you don't know about him, you're about to read a little bit about Karl May. So I will see you in the next video and also on Zoom at our next meeting. So vielen Dank, tschüss, auf Wiedersehen.